Leon S. Kennedy and Ada Wong, two characters from a beloved horror gaming franchise that share a lot of history, both first appearing in the second installment of the game's Resident Evil 2. Right from the get-go, these two characters take quite a liking for one another. There has been a heavy hint of romance between these two. However, as it turned out, Ada was actually a mercenary sent to retrieve a sample of the G virus, which was the virus responsible for the main monster in this game, William Birkin, as that's what Resident Evil as a franchise is mainly about. It's about viruses and big ass monsters. Chances are that's why you also like the franchise, because it's about big ass monster, the viruses that make these monsters, and the scary atmosphere that they bring with them. Romance or the interpersonal relationships between these characters, while interesting in some cases, were never really a selling point for any of these games. And so what happens when you try to force romance between two characters that have only really met once for like 4 hours in total, and their entire companionship was essentially built upon lies and manipulation. But it was the only real hint of romance in the entire franchise, so the fans naturally started to latch onto it. What happens then? You get Leon and Ada. Now, despite being arguably the most popular ship in the franchise, Leon and Ada do not really share screen time all that much. And whenever they do, Ada is constantly proving that she is a toxic, manipulative, avoidant mercenary, because that's what she is. You can say that she helps Leon throughout the game, she saves him a lot of times. And you're right, but that just proves that she's not a complete monster. She's someone who at times attempts to change, but eventually just falls back into her old ways anyway. And that's a trait we can observe with a lot of toxic personalities in fiction, really. One example would be Tony Soprano from The Sopranos. And there are going to be minor spoilers for like next few seconds for The Sopranos. Namely, after he got shot and almost died in season 6. Tony genuinely tries to change, but eventually just slips back to his old ways, because that's really just who he is and what his environment shapes him up to be. You can also compare this to myself when I say I'm gonna stop watching Instagram Reels, but 2 days after I'm scrolling for 8 hours again. Now, Ada is not that complex of a character, but there are moments you can observe these attempts to change, namely through her admiration for Leon. I'm calling this admiration because that's really what it is. Ada admires Leon because she sees in him the person that she wants to be. From the get-go, and we can see this mainly in Resident Evil 2 Remake, while she's the first one to save Leon, she doesn't really do it out of the goodness in her heart. She really only did it because she was looking for Ben, the prisoner, for information. After that, Ada sees a useful asset in Leon, which she even states herself. I think we can pinpoint when she starts to see more in Leon than just an asset. And that's when they meet Kendo and his daughter. Ada quickly wants to dispose of Kendo's daughter because she is a threat. Obviously she's infected, she's going to turn and subsequently kill Kendo himself if he doesn't give up on her. Leon then explains that he wanted to become a cop to protect, people like them. Obviously stands up to Ada and tells her to just let him go. Just let him say goodbye and do their thing. And again, it's not like she cared about Kendo or anything, but Ada recognizes that Leon is not only capable, but he's also a good person. And again, you might make the argument that this does not happen in the original, but I'm using the remake because in the remake the characters are simply more fleshed out. There is really nothing to the characters in the original. I would try to link all of this to Ada's backstory, but the thing is, nothing is known about her early life. In fact, as early as in Resident Evil 3, it was established that Ada Wong is not even her real name. Something that was never addressed again, and something that was probably forgotten about. So we can assume that Ada Wong is at least her real name, but we cannot really be sure. What we do know, however, is that she was a mercenary in pretty early stages of her life. In Resident Evil 2, she's 24, and she's already pretty skilled, so we can assume she has been in the business for quite some time at least. You could almost say that she's been on the grind set from a very young age. which I respect. But because of that, we can also assume that she has always been surrounded by people who are also way too focused on the grind, which I on one hand respect, but on the other hand, it seems that Leon was the first person she ever met that, you know, had any sort of empathy within him. And not only that, Leon also proved himself to be competent, which is something she valued because of her work. And again, most of her early life is not known, therefore I'm making a lot of assumptions here, but given how she behaves throughout the series, it's safe to assume that she does not really build any emotional connections. We also know that she takes advantage of other people's emotions, particularly men, as she used an Umbrella researcher named John Clemens, whom she entered a relationship with to gain intel from Umbrella. And this man John had a whole ass picture with her and even used her name as his password on his computer at work. And everyone is talking about how Leon or Chris or Ethan are the most tragic Resident Evil characters, but god damn it, my man John, he needs to get some pity to his name, because this is just sad. And admittedly, we do not know if this is the case for the remake, and I was talking about the remake for most of the time, as Ada uses a different cover in the remake. She claims to be an FBI investigator, whereas in the original she said she is looking for John, but regardless, she still uses Leon in a similar manner. In fact, in the remake, she kisses him as a means for her to obtain the G-Virus. As we can see that despite her growing respect for Leon, she still really had no intentions of ever staying with him or, you know, helping him after she obtains the G-Virus. So the kiss is still mainly used for manipulation, which actually differs from the original. In the original, in Leon B scenario, which is the canon one, she kisses him after the tyrant, you know, fatally injures her, which the injury is not as fatal as we thought, but it happens moments before she thinks she's going to die, so that makes the kiss more genuine. But the point is, even if the whole ordeal with John did not happen in the remakes, this doesn't really change anything. And now we have the ending. Obviously at the end, Ada helps out Leon by giving him the rocket launcher, which again is not any sign of like deep feelings or anything. It's just a sign that Ada is not a complete monster. She had a rocket launcher at her disposal that she, I assume, found somewhere in Umbrella, and she helped out Leon when he needed it. She also helps out Claire in the Claire B scenario in the original game, which, even if it's not canon, it still helps to paint Ada's character. And that was pretty much it for Resident Evil 2, you know, Ada and Leon parted ways, with Leon thinking she's dead. Seemingly he has no hard feelings about the betrayal, and apparently he also moves on with his life, you know, he continues just living. The next time the two have met is Resident Evil 4, and in this game it's quite obvious that the two are on the opposing sides. Here Ada does not even try to deny her position as a mercenary. I mean, even if she did, that'd be pretty stupid, because if she wasn't a mercenary, why would she be in Spain? And mind you, this was 6 years after Raccoon City, and in Raccoon City they only knew each other for a couple of hours, and their entire companionship was built on lies. So it's not really shocking to see Leon not being very thrilled to see her again.
Don't you do us all a favor and leave before the audience gets pissed off?
Because he shouldn't be, and he really wasn't. On one hand, he wasn't shocked that she's alive, so he probably had some idea that she survived. And on the other, there was this whole thing of her just using him. And that's pretty much how Resident Evil 4 ends for these two. Ada takes the Plaga sample away from Leon, and she leaves. She gives him the keys to escape from the island, but that's just it, that she's gone. Again, they help each other throughout the game a couple of times. This time especially Ada aids Leon in his quest, but whenever they're interacting with each other, she's constantly lying and manipulating. Again, there is simply no honesty between the two of them. And mind you, that's when they are interacting with each other, because for the majority of time they aren't. They're just doing their own thing, and they run into each other every now and then. And mind you, they haven't spoken for 6 years. And that is something I respect more about the remake than the original, despite the original Resident Evil 4 being my favorite game of all time. At the end of the day, Leon just simply says, fuck off, we're done, we're going our separate ways.
Say that again?
Which I gotta respect my glorious king for having, self-respect. In the original, Leon said some romanticized shit about how, she's just someone he can let go.
She's like a part of me I can't let go. Let's leave it at that.
What? Bro, what are you talking about, man?
After not interacting with this person for 6 years, and all of their interaction being based on a lie, you can clearly see how unhealthy and toxic this is. Yes, sure, they can help each other every now and then, and obviously they share this trauma bond from Raccoon City. But unless Ada truly, puts an effort into changing, those two's moral values are simply not compatible. But up until this point, this would be all fine. But then there was this one scene in Resident Evil Damnation, the CGI movie.
When are we going to, carry on from where we left off that night?
Anytime but now.
And whoever wrote this scene, whoever wrote this piece of dialogue, whoever greenlit it, whoever had anything to do with this piece of dialogue should immediately be fired. Obviously this implies there are heavy implications in this scene. And quite frankly, this whole scene was written just as, a piece of fan service. Haha, Leon likes Ada and Ada likes Leon and the two have a history. Let's include a piece of dialogue that implies they had sex, they did the sex. As we established how toxic Ada really is, pushing this type of narrative where it's implied that the two are going to end up together in some way, or they still want to be together, whatever, especially on Leon's part, especially pushing this narrative that Leon still wants to be with Ada despite everything that she has done to him, is really not giving a good message. It is just one instance of media sort of romanticizing toxic relationships. And to add an insult to the injury, this scene is never addressed again. It's never talked about again, it's never built upon again. This is a piece of dialogue that was completely and utterly pointless.
You serve zero purpose.
And that's not to say that Resident Evil has some sort of magnificent writing. It never did. And the movies were always, even though they're canon to the games, they were always sort of disconnected because they have different writers. The writers that make the movies might not agree with the games and vice versa, and all that shit. If the movies are going to serve zero purpose and are always going to end on status quo, then stop making them. And this coming from someone who actually thinks Damnation is a pretty good movie. I think it has pretty good themes, a pretty good message and all that stuff. I think it's one of the better Resident Evil movies, at least for Resident Evil standards. It's a good movie. I think all of the characters, at least the main ones, were pretty compelling. But that scene always pissed me off. But Leon and Ada met in Resident Evil 6, how did things end up between them in there? I'm sure there had to be some resolution or something, because that was the last time they were seen together. And long story short, it ended even worse than it was before, because there was this whole plot line with Ada's clone Carla. This whole thing made Leon even more confused, to the point where the last thing Leon tells Ada in the franchise ever, he asks her, "What even are you?" or something around those lines.
What are you? Why are you helping us?
My man is not even sure if Ada is human. And they have been at it for almost 30 years. Almost 30 years. 30 years of this will they, won't they in a survival horror action franchise. And I'm saying I am tired. For all these people out there saying that they just want Leon to be finally happy, I agree. Let my man be happy and move on from this manipulative, conniving, lying, toxic mercenary. Let these two have stories separate from each other. Ada's story does not have to revolve around Leon, and Leon's does not have to revolve around Ada. In fact, I would say Resident Evil Vendetta, while that movie itself was kinda ass, I think Leon's plotline is, you know, pretty good there. He's trying to move forward with his life, he's, you know, visibly depressed and all that stuff, and it has no Ada in there. And you know, he's just trying to deal with all the shit he's been through. While Ada did not end up being in Resident Evil Village, there was a concept art that, you know, she was supposed to be there, but she was cut. Just let her have a story of her own. Explore her character outside of being a manipulative, conniving, toxic person. And you know, build up her character. She's one of the fan favorites. She deserves to have some space outside of just being a ploy to Leon. I hope the ending of Resident Evil 4 Remake, where Leon tells her they are going their separate ways, are an indicator where the franchise is moving forward, with those two not being together, because they should not be together. Anyway, if you enjoyed this video, leave a like and leave a comment if you agree, and if you disagree, also leave a comment, but I will probably ignore it because I'm objectively right in every matter, and anyone who disagrees with me is ontologically evil. But regardless, if you made it this far, thanks for giving me the precious time of your day, and hopefully I will have the pleasure to have you here next time. The S stands for silly, the greatest Resident Evil content creator out.